Hey, Monica. It is so fun to have you back, our sister from the
Uh,
sisterhood.
Oh, so great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah,
Well,
well, can we just remember when you were on the first time on the podcast, we hadn't met in
Mm,
person yet. Is that
no,
true?
that's true.
And now we've met in person, and
Hmm.
so it feels like a whole different situation.
Totally.
And I
Okay.
just wish that everyone listening could meet you in person because
Oh.
you're
yes.
such a warm Hawaiian sunshine. You bring the sunshine with you.
I feel the same way about you guys though. So I don't think it's a Hawaii thing. It's just
Oh.
a sister thing. So
Mm.
hey everyone.
It's a sister thing.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, we're talking about leading our lives with family relationships today, Monica.
Hmm.
And, this series really is talking about these different ways we can lead our lives. And we felt like leading our lives in family relationships is a great place to start because, as we know from experience, from research, that actually the quality of our relationships has a direct impact on the
Hmm.
happiness of our lives. And it's well backed. Scripture
Hmm.
has told us that.
Hmm.
So, for
Hmm.
lots of years, this is no mystery. And yet the practice of it is hard. And because these are the people we live with every
Hmm.
single day,
Hmm.
they're our closest relationships. They see us in all of our glory, good and bad. And so, let's start by just asking, we know that these relationships are central. So why is growing and fostering family relationships so important to leading our lives well? Like, why do we start there?
Yeah. Well, I just have to think it's kind of how God wired us. Like as we have relationship with him, and then the next closest thing is these people that we are in a family relationship with. And I just think it's really hard to go out and do work, do ministry, do anything when you're unsettled in the relationships nearest to you. And that doesn't mean they have to be perfect. It just means you want to have peace knowing that you're doing what you can, your very
Mhm.
best. So yeah, I think that's kind of just how we're wired as humans, maybe.
Hmm. I was thinking too, just as you were saying that doesn't change as our kids get older and leave
Mm-mm,
the home
mm-mm,
either.
mm-mm.
Like the quality of our relationships with those in the home
Mhm,
and our spouse, if we're married, and the ones that are out of our home
mhm, mhm.
and out on their own. Have you found that to be true also?
Oh, for sure. I heard somebody say, I wish I knew who it was to quote, but they said, we're only as happy as our least happy child.
Mhm.
And don't love that because I don't
Mhm.
want it to be true. I'd like to believe that as people of faith that we can have at least an inner peace and joy even if one of our children are struggling, but I do believe that there's some truth to that. And as you two know, I've gone through a little bit of a challenge with one of my college kids who has just gone through a difficult time, just some anxiety and stress while he's been away, and we haven't totally figured it out. And there's no doubt, even though he's across the ocean and so far from me, he's on my mind all the time. And until I know that like he's doing well, I have trouble having, a real settled spirit. So I try to have faith that God's got him, that, he's in good hands. But as a mom, that can be really hard.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've noticed about you walking through that is that you are a safe place,
Mm,
that you are a safe place to land
mm,
for your child.
mhm,
And that matters.
mm,
And we may not do things perfectly.
mhm.
And maybe we do say things that are hurtful to our kids sometimes, but
Mhm.
ultimately they know,
Yeah,
like, and in your case, he knows this is a safe person
yeah,
and I am safe here
yeah.
to really share everything that I'm going
That's
through.
that's the hope. That's the heart.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's the
Thanks.
hope. And
Thanks.
so I think that gets to family culture and
Hmm.
building family
Yeah.
culture
Yeah.
and family culture that we've built through the years, but also that we're building as our kids get older. So can you talk a
Hmm.
little bit about how you've built your family culture and what you do?
Yes. Well, I was going to say, even as you were commenting on that is something ideally that we begin when they're young, is letting them know that they have a safe place. And I think that part of that is just being intentional to show up and talk to them and ask them questions and actually listen when they answer. Because I know I'm pretty good at asking questions and then completely tuning out in my busyness. And so I think that part of that is just being sure that as they grow up, they know that we care, that we're invested in them. Sometimes we're real busy and that's hard to do, but even carving out a few minutes a day of just connecting eye to eye, or, having those conversations, sometimes via text message or some other way. But certainly the culture that we build is happens through everyday moments. It's not something we can, hang a sign on the wall and say, this is who we are, and then live completely differently. Our culture is going to be built by how do we spend our time? How do we spend our money? What do we do every night around the dinner table or not around a dinner table? Like what are the choices we're making on a daily basis? Because those are what build the culture that our kids will grow up in. And so it's not easy. It takes intentional effort and purposefulness, but it can be a beautiful thing. And I think it's really fun when you realize the opportunity you have. Like, look, I've got these people. I didn't get to choose the culture I grew up in, but I get to choose the kind of culture these kids will grow up in. And it'll never be perfect, but we have a lot of say in what that looks like. And so I think it's super cool.
Well, Monica, I have a question for you in that. And I am wondering about the woman who thinks, yeah, I want to be really intentional in these areas. And I'm not feeling 100% supported by my partner in that.
Yeah.
How do you speak to her? How do you encourage her as she's trying to add some intentionality and maybe feels a little bit like a Lone Ranger?
Man. First of all, that's such a tough one, and God bless you, because God does see your heart. And I think it's so hard, and it's a reality. I mean, there's two of us, right? Typically, whether we're together or apart, two parents, and we're never going to be on the exact same page all the time, at least in my home. But I will say, from those I've talked to who are adults who maybe grew up in less than ideal situations, it's incredible how much one parent who's truly invested and prayerful and intentional can do. Like, God can use one really involved and caring parent in ways we don't even know in the moment. So rather than focus on all the areas you're not on the same page or how you wish things were, how it looks like online everybody else is, which is not true, by the way, I say just decide, I'm going to do the best I can do. And hopefully the other partner is going to see it and want to be a part of it. I keep inviting them in, but I certainly don't sit around and wait for my husband to, start doing family devotions or do something fun, or I just say, let's do it. And hey, you want to join us? And so I think sometimes we're sitting around waiting a little bit too much for the other person to take the lead. And if God's put it on your heart, then you be the one to lead and invite them in. And if they don't, so be it. You can't control that other person. So just trust that God can use you in some really big ways.
I think that offers a lot of freedom in leading your life in that way and saying, I'm going to be the best parent I can, the best mom. I think for a lot of women, that's really helpful.
Good. Hope so.
And I always go back to, I can't tell you how much in my coaching sessions I go back to this and I say, who can you control?
Yep.
Like, that's my question. Who can you control? And every time it's me, and I'm like, yeah, so control you. Because we can't control what anyone around us is doing, but we can control us, how we're leading, what opportunities we're providing. Yeah. And that is so helpful to think about. So I really like that answer. Monica, I've got another question kind of around this idea of building culture. And what idea or what role do you think vulnerability plays in building culture?
You're talking vulnerability before our kids, like our own.
Yeah. And I'm thinking through like building a culture where your child is safe to come to you on with him.
Right.
So what role do you think that plays?
Well, I think it's huge. I think that by the time our kids are teens, maybe even tweens, they've already figured out that we're not perfect, that we're not God. Like, they see us as humans eventually. By the time they're in college, they're starting to really realize, or out of high school, they're like, oh, they start to really really see things more clearly. And so I think that we're only fooling ourselves if we're not really authentic with our kids. We want to be wise. We want to be discerning in this, but I think that beginning to talk to our kids about areas that we know that we have failed, maybe failed them, maybe areas that we're working on in our own life as they hit those teenage years, we can really have some great conversations. And again, you want to, be appropriate with their age and with what you share. But by the time my kids were seniors in high school, I've kind of just shared my own personal testimony, which isn't, something that I would share with them when they were younger, and a lot more of my honest story, because I want them to know as they go out into the world, who their mom really is and some of her background that they weren't ready for a few years ago. And so I think that sharing our story and then having those conversations where we're just owning up to things and saying, hey, this is an area I'm working on. Like, I haven't done great at it, but these are the steps I'm taking to do better. I think they really respect that. And that also gives them that safe place to be like, wow, I can come to mom. She gets it. She knows that, everybody has a journey to take. So I feel like in my family, it's really kept those doors open and given my kids a lot more freedom to come to me and talk about all their things.
Yeah, sometimes we don't even think to do it. I'm not sure why, but sometimes we don't even think to share in that vulnerable space. And it's almost as if we actually have to be intentional about, I should share with my child this struggle that I'm having.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That I'm just having to the side over here, but my child has no idea that that I'm even wrestling with this. And like, how helpful would it be if he knew that I was wrestling with this?
Totally.
But I often don't even think to tell him.
Same. But when I do, I'm starting to learn. My kids, not only do they appreciate it, but they've got some serious wisdom. Like a couple of my kids have given me some really good advice. And, you don't want to cross that line where like you're becoming too much friends. You're always the parent. And I think that's probably what stops us, is we feel like we need to be the parent. But they're becoming adults. By the time they're teenagers, they are growing into adulthood. So I think it's a really healthy thing to begin to be more vulnerable and honest.
So good. Well, and Alex and I have talked before about the culture code on the podcast. And that is one of the anchors of creating culture, even in companies, is to have some vulnerability in leadership. And I mean, it's the same thing in our families. Yeah. We got to have it. So thank you for that. Well, you talk a lot about pouring into our kids. And I really like, when we look at this idea of leading our life and how we spend our time, this plays into that. And so I would love for you to just share how you do that and even how you make time for that.
Yeah. Well, it's changed over the years for sure. I think looking back to when my first 3 sons were young and they were my full-time job, I was blessed to be a stay-at-home mom. And other than teaching some fitness on the side, I was pretty much just committed to them. So I think that was a real privilege and an honor. And now I've taken on by choice a lot more work. So I realize now how hard it can be. Like when you've got other things, if you're a working parent, if you've got other obligations and responsibilities. But I think even in a short time, there's a lot we can do if we're intentional. I think that just a few moments a day of connecting with our kids, because I've said before, I've spent full days with my kids where I don't really connect all day, where I'm not really present. And so it's not about time, but it is about intentionality. So I think pouring into them is really just a matter of your focus, your heart, just like all the other things that we handle in life. Like, am I really interested in what they're interested in? Do I really know what? And I just, this morning, as I was praying for my kids, realized that one of my sons had something going on that I kind of just forgot to check in on, and he didn't bring it up. And I was like, oh, like that's one way I really need to be all in, is showing him that that's on my mind. So whether that takes journaling it, having a little to-do list, there's nothing wrong with writing down things in our family, along with all of our work items and other items on our to-do list. So just being really intentional and finding a system that works for you, and just staying connected, bringing conversation. So much of it comes down to just talking to our kids, which comes easier for some of us than others, but like talking to them, checking in, texting, sending those memes and DMs, which communicates to many of where they're at in life right now. It's all good.
Well, and you have boys. And so I'm always
Yeah.
thinking about, boys. I mean, literally my son, my high schooler, he sends me memes. Well, they
Oh
all
yeah.
send me memes all the time, but
Don't
especially
you
two of
love
them
it?
send me
I love it.
memes. And so like on my
Yeah.
Instagram, DMs, it's like these memes that they send me,
Oh
which is
yeah.
so fun. But boys do communicate a little bit differently.
They do.
And there often is that side by side thing. So do you feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's played into how you have poured into them, is trying to meet them even in that way where they're at?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I think that humor is a great way to connect with our boys. And we need to parent. Yes, we need to be setting the boundaries and doing all the things. But I think the more we build that relationship and we have the humor and we enjoy them and they feel like they're enjoyed, the more they're going to respond when we need to say, no, that's a no. And when we give those boundaries, they're going to respond a lot more positively if we've built the relationship first. So start with relationship.
Yeah, it's really good. And I want to just give a shout out to play, that often, we forget to play with our kids.
Yeah.
And that does lead to laughter, right? When
Yes.
we take the time to just play and do fun things and little, whatever it is, but we can always do more of that.
We can. And I mean, for us this winter alone, we went through a ping pong phase. We went through a card phase. Uno was over holidays. I'm like, playing doesn't have to mean you're outside throwing a ball. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it means you're just sitting around a table playing a board game. And that's great.
Or painting.
Painting.
Yeah, we're lots of crafts at our house is the way that we.
I was going to say that
play.
That's a girl mom right there.
That's a girl mom.
That's right.
I bring up.
We're not doing ping pong.
We're not painting.
I'm like, do you guys want to paint? They're like,
yeah, no.
I'm not going to give up though, because I do enjoy. I'm terrible, but I enjoy.
Have you tried spicy Uno, Monica?
I had somebody else bring that up. Now, my sons have added all kinds of rules. Is that all it is? Is you're adding rules to Uno? Is that what makes it
I'm new to spicy Uno. I'm just learning, but it seems fun. Yeah, just this weekend actually was when spicy Uno was brought up. So that's why I want to know if you guys were into spicy Uno.
Isn't it funny how things just kind of cyclically come back up, like Uno? It's been years since I've thought about Uno, and all of a sudden it's like everywhere.
Yes.
My son has a Rubik's Cube as well. I don't know if that's just
him, yeah, that has, of course, that's made a comeback because 80s.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, everything's 80s. So your boys have really close relationships, and it's something I think that we all want. We all want our kids. And it has been, for me, as my kids are getting older, been one of the greatest joys of my life to see them choose each other. And so what have you done, Monica, and what are you doing currently to foster sibling relationships?
Yes, it's one of my favorite things too. And I know that with anything in parenting, there's no formula, there's no guarantees. Somebody might do all the same things as you and I, and it just isn't the case. And yet I like to say, you never know what's going to happen later. I'm a lot closer to my older brother than I was growing up, for sure. But certainly the number one suggestion I have is to make sure kids have time together. And I think our lives are so busy, and so often kids are going to school in different places, or at least different classrooms, and then they've got their separate activities, and then it's the weekend and they're running off with their friends. And I think it's important as parents to, as much as we want to encourage all those good things, to say, really protect some family time. And if that means a certain amount of time on the weekend, you're just together as a family. And, I know some people go on vacations and they invite friends along, and I have great memories doing that growing up. But sometimes I think vacations are best to just keep it the family, because that's quality time. And even if kids bicker and fight, when they're stuck together, they're going to eventually figure out how to get along and they're going to make memories. And those fights actually are developing conflict resolution skills that will go with them into their future. So I think time together is huge. I mean, I even encourage when kids can share a bedroom. I think that's great. I think that really fosters a relationship. So we've given them a lot of time together. Of course, we homeschool, so that gives a little advantage in the time thing, but it's still possible to homeschool and have them running off different directions. So I don't think that's the only key. So yeah, I think we've given them a lot of time. And then currently, as we have 2 living in California and 2 here, the biggest thing that we really do is we support their efforts to try to be together. And as we're talking, the 4 boys are all planning a snowboarding trip together that they did not invite their parents. They said, sorry, guys, this is a bro trip.
It's a bro trip. I mean,
yeah.
gosh, that is just seriously the best.
Yeah. And the 12-year-old completely instigated it. I mean, I feel like the older brothers are excited, but the 12-year-old was like, this is happening and I'm not going to shut up until it happens. So they are all flying from their different places, meeting up, and they're going to have about 5 days together in Washington at their grandparents' cabin. And so I think just being supportive of that, it would have been easy for us to be like, not only can we not afford it, but it's just silly and we don't have time. But we were like, no, let's make this happen because we know these are special memories. So yeah, giving them adventures. If they're all at home, making sure they get out together, go for some hikes, do a road trip, take a day trip, just making sure they are building memories by getting outside of the house and doing some things that they'll remember for a lifetime.
So fun. And I was thinking about when you were talking that we intentionally do parents' nights out. So sometimes when we're like when we went on a big trip in June, and Eric and I went out, and the kids, we gave them money and they got to go do their own thing where we were. So it was actually in a town in Europe, and they got to go and explore and do their own thing. And that was really fun for them. Right. So it's like you're setting the table for them to have a really great experience together. And that's what I just heard you say is, yes, yeah, it was a sacrifice. And, sometimes it's hard to figure out how you're going to do it, but ultimately you are setting them up for success for their relationships. And that builds the family in a really unique way.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I love it.
That's so fun. Well, I love your boys. I love watching how your boys love each other. And that to me, one of the things I've seen in my own kids is that they go to each other to help each other through. And I just saw a study. I don't know if the both of you saw that study that came out this week, and I can't even remember who published it, but it's all over the news about girls, about our teen girls. And it was alarming before the statistics. These statistics are so alarming. It's 1 in 2 girls that's suffering from anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts. And we are in a crisis. And when I think about the role of siblings, it is more important than ever, because there are going to be some things that our kids maybe don't want to bring to a parent. But they will to a sibling if that sibling is safe. And so the more we can do to create that foundational safety net for them, the more people that can be a part of that safety net, the better, because our adolescents need it desperately.
You are so right. I couldn't agree more. And in Raising Amazing, I share some research as well, just about adults who are still close and how there's a really high correlation between kids who are close. And so though people like me say, oh, I have a better relationship with my brother now than ever, that happens, but it's worthwhile to invest. Don't just assume, oh, they're just going to tolerate each other for now. They'll get along later. Really putting that time and energy in, I think, makes a difference. And I think from what you just shared, how important that we can point our kids to each other. They might not even be thinking that way. They might be thinking friend, friend, friend. But if you're like, you know what, you too, talk to each other, like encourage that. If parents can encourage them, you might think that you're completely different, but you actually have a lot more in common than you do different from one another. So really encouraging them to turn to one another, it might make them consider something they weren't thinking of already.
Yeah. I think all of those can be done in the micro too, right? The little tiny moments, the little tiny events. Like it doesn't have to be a big vacation where you send them off together. It doesn't even have to be a big dinner. It can just be like, I want you two to go walk to the mailbox and get the mail or walk the dog. And I'm going to count on you talking to each other. Not you're going to take your AirPods out, you're going to communicate, you're going to put your phones away and giving some real direction in that. Because I'm thinking of the mom whose kids maybe really aren't vibing right now. Like what are some ways that we can help her think of some concrete things to put them in a place together where they are connecting? And I think offering some structured activities like games or crafts or outings is good. And it's also those little tiny moments where you're encouraging them to face each other and be together. And I also like the room sharing. I'm big on that.
Well, even chores. I mean, I'm thinking of even chores. And once I heard someone talk about how if you give them a common goal, so like a common goal is dishes done, laundry folded or whatever, but you give them a common goal and then they can work toward that goal together. And that creates teamwork, which creates bonding, which I like.
Yeah. And Krista, on that topic, I don't know if you've gotten to it, but in Raising Amazing, I have a little interview with your precious daughter where she talks about doing dishes and family bonding. And so I know you guys did a great job of that because I talked to your daughter about it. And I love that the expectation after dinner at night was mom and dad go have some couch time and kids get the dishes done. So that inspired me for sure, how your kids have worked together. And that's a bonding time. Certainly they might fight over the dishes for a few minutes, but eventually they're going to get over it and just start, playing some music and talking and having a good time. But Alex, I love that you mentioned the micro moments because it is so true. It can be, and I think as parents, we need to realize we get to do that. We don't be afraid to parent. Don't be afraid to say 10 minutes. I want you two in a room together. And I just want you to talk. Like they might think we're crazy. They might like roll their eyes, but what if we all did that and gave them those 10 minutes, a few times a week, every day, once a week? I don't know. But I think we should be bold to be able to say, I know what you don't know. And that is that you need each other. I know what you don't know. And that is one day I won't be here, but you two will. And I want you to have this relationship for a lifetime. So don't be afraid to speak some strong, encouraging, life-giving words to your kids and see what happens from there.
Yeah. I tell my girls all the time, the best gift I gave you was each other. And sometimes it's because we have limitations as a big family. We can't do X because I have all these sisters. Like my friend who's an only child gets to do all these things and I don't get to do them because we have a big family. And I'm like, in the end, you win.
Yes.
In the end, you have the more valuable asset.
Yes.
And not that life's competition, but since you're doing the comparing, I'm going to go with that. And I really, as an only child, as someone who grew up an only child.
I was going to say, you have street cred when you say that.
Yes, you do.
And so they flip that on me and say, but you don't know what it's like to have a little sister. And I say, you're right. I wish I did. So that's probably not so great either. But anyway,
that's okay. It works.
I do push back to them. This is a gift that we chose and it is a good gift.
Yeah. It is.
And I was thinking when you were talking, Monica, that there is some risk sometimes, especially as kids get older and there's dynamics with teenagers but the risk is worth it, right? Of feeling a little bit awkward about putting them in a room or having that just uncomfortable, feeling of like trying to create family fun or whatever. Sure. There's some risk in that, but it's worth the risk. I mean, even as parents, we can feel that way sometimes, but it's worth the risk and push through. And it's back to your point, Alex. Sometimes it's even a risk with your spouse and, that you may come at things differently and they may think it's like overdone what you're doing or whatever it is. But that it's worth the risk.
Right. And I'd love to hop in there and also remind everyone, including myself, that there are seasons too. If your kids aren't vibing, as Alex says, love it. It may not, don't freak out and think, oh no, all is lost. They're never going to like each other. Keep putting the effort in, keep giving them time together, but they're all going through different seasons and stages and hormones and all the rest. So also be patient, try to keep the big picture in mind and not stress out too much.
Yeah, that's a really good word. It's really good.
Because I have 9 years between my oldest and my youngest. So they're 20 and 11 right now. And they have the cutest relationship. It's so sweet, but it's different than it was when they were 11 and 2.
Yeah.
Right. Because that gap, that what feels like a large gap is going to continue to close as they get older and older.
Exactly.
But also it's just a great reminder that different seasons are going to bring different things.
Yeah.
Well, Monica, what would you say are 3 of your best resources for building a solid family life as we're looking at this idea of leading our lives with family relationships?
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you say resources, are you looking for necessarily like a book kind of resource or just ideas for
It could be,
building strong families?
honestly, like whatever you want. It could be websites, it could be an app, it could be a game, it could be a
Ooh,
questions. Just
3 things.
yeah, 3.
Okay.
Just 3.
3 things. Um, wow. I'm going to suggest for building strong families. So we're not just talking boys, we're talking families, correct?
But
Yeah,
it could, that's fine if you want to throw in some boy tips, because that's always helpful for people.
right. And also there's different ages and stages of life. I love the idea of like family devotional time. We haven't been very consistent about family devotional time, but when we do it, I'm so glad we do. So I would say find what works for you and try to be consistent. And that doesn't mean every Sunday night or Wednesday night or whatever. It just means gather as a family. If it's around the dinner table or if it's around, the fire, whatever it might be. But for us, we've gone through different things. We've just read some Proverbs together and just talked about it. We pulled out a guitar and had one of the guys who plays, lead us in some worship, and then just sit around and talk, have ice cream. But that intentional gathering time, especially around God's word or worship, has really been helpful for us, I think, to just bond us as a family. And now that my boys are older, they talk about it as though we did it all the time, and we didn't. I mean, we had months in between, but they remember those 3 or 4 really good evenings. So that's one thing. Another thing I would say is if you can read through a book together. I love Solly Clarkson's, and I'm going to forget, or it's actually her husband wrote it. Is it the 24 Family Ways? It's a something family ways.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's good when kids are young. So again, if your kids are younger, especially, it really teaches kind of that family culture that as a family, these are things we value. Ruth Cho Simons and her husband wrote Foundations, which again it's good for maybe teenagers, and it's conversational. So using a resource that you trust to walk through together, I think is good. Otherwise, I think if we can call it a resource, I'd say adventure. You ask my boys what has most bonded them to mom and dad and one another, it is always adventure. And adventure, I think sometimes we get this lofty idea that has to mean you're hiking a mountain or you're doing something crazy. Adventure can be just getting out the door, just doing something that is outside the norm, because they remember those things. Those are the things that stand out to them. So adventure might just be, let's pack up early and get out before the sun rises and do something that you're going to remember. Take a drive, watch the sunrise. It might mean, challenging each other to train for a race. It might mean planning for a vacation that's 2 years out, but we're going to raise money and save until we can do it. So I think doing anything like that builds teamwork. So yeah, I think it's important that we don't look at resources so much like a book or a study, but like what are we just being intentional about doing together? And so it can look all different ways, but if you're thinking about it, your own family culture will come up and you'll probably find something that's uniquely you.
So good. I love that. Yes, yes, yes. Well, Monica, as we're closing today, what would your final encouragement be, or just maybe a word or a phrase that people can hold on to as they're leading their family relationships?
I think that I would say just understanding that we get to partner with God in raising our kids. I think that we tend to have 2 extremes when it comes to parenting, and that is one of them being, it's all up to me. There's so much pressure. I can't do this, and it's overwhelming and suffocating. And the other might be, well, I'm not perfect. I'm a hot mess mom, some of those more culturally popular trending things. And so it's just like, if you're a believer, you want to say, oh, God's got them. There's nothing I can do. And I say, let's come into the middle and say, how can I partner with God in being the best imperfect parent I can be? How can I be intentional in the middle of a busy, crazy life? Like, acknowledge and accept that life is really hard and crazy. And most of us have a lot going on that is outside of our control. But how can I partner with God, trusting him to do what only he can do and doing my best to do what I can do? So I think there's a healthy partnership that we should all be striving for.
It's really, really beautiful. Well, Monica, thank you. We're so excited about your book, Raising Amazing. And I have to say, we were one of the first people you told that title to. And we were like, run with it. This is so good. So good. It was at the retreat. We were talking about it.
And you are so kind to listen to me just carry on. And it feels like so long ago. And it's finally coming out. And I have a special necklace that says Raising Amazing on it that you all gifted me. So thank you for your support all along the way.
Oh gosh, it's just so fun to see it come to fruition. It's so fun. And we're just cheering you. We're just cheering you. And thanks for living out what you write about. I mean, it's just so authentic in you and through you. And so we can fully endorse everything you say because we know you live it. And that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much. That means the world.
We love you, Monica.
Love you. Aloha, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.